We've got Cody Urban here, who we helped fund to go to the G7 in Japan. And so he's come back here. This is 7/11 and 2023. And Cody's here as our guest to give a report back. So, Cody, go ahead.
All right. Well, first of all, I just wanted to thank, again, Veterans for Peace for helping me get to Japan, which I'll say a bit why I say me instead of us when I get into it. There were some unexpected things, unfortunately, that happened that showcased the true nature of the Japanese government. I guess I could just say that right off the bat, is that out of all of us coming in from the US, I was the only one who got in.
Is that right?
That got in. 3 of us came from the US to join, from Resist US-led War Movement, to join the others who were coming in from Hong Kong, South Korea, Philippines. And I got in 2 days before the G7 summit started. The other 2, Rhonda from San Francisco and Carly from Seattle, both were detained. They were held by Japanese immigration. They had their passports taken. Were completely searched, and they were questioned, and eventually they were sent home. They were denied entry. When they were in there, they saw this sign that said, what is it called? Like, because of the G7 meetings happening in the country, there's going to be different procedures in place. So we're sorry for the inconvenience. That was inside of the immigration holding area.
Were they given a reason?
They said, we know you're activists, and it's not a good time. It's not a safe time to allow you into Japan. They said no, they pushed, saying we're just here to visit. Obviously there was more truth. There was more to say there. But with Carly was held about 3 hours, I think. They found a flyer from an Amazon workers rally in Carly's bag and said, look, you had this flyer. This is how we know you are an activist. Were you going to give this out to people in Japan? And they were like, no, I forgot that was in there. That was from a rally I was at months ago, kind of thing. With Rhonda actually came with some of our material we were going to give folks in Japan. And so she was held for much longer. She was held for over 48 hours.
Really?
She was held, forced to stay within the immigration cells in the holding area in Kansai Airport. Pretty much, she was, it was not like a prison cell, but she couldn't leave. So it was more or less like what it was for her. And then they sent her back. So I was the only one, unfortunately, who actually got in. And I think that really shows just how far the Japanese government has gone to be the US's just guard dog in Asia Pacific, literally. I mean, after Shinzo Abe changed the constitution to make the military an offensive military again, Fumio Kishida, the current prime minister, kind of took the next step, which is now upping the ante and making plans to increase Japan's military budget twice-fold by 2027, which is the year that all these Pentagon officials are and think tanks are getting paid to say, oh, we predict that there will be open U.S. and China conflict by 2027. That's the year they always put out there, which is very harrowing. Before I get into what we were able to do, I want to show one other picture. I was going to save this for my intro. I'll do it for my outro. Yeah. But something I was always looking forward to seeing and was almost dreaming of for years is the Hiroshima Peace Memorial. The building that when the bomb was dropped on Hiroshima and flattened the city, there was one building that was still standing.
The one with that metal
dome.
Dome.
And so I finally saw it. The one they didn't rebuild it; they left it as it was, as a memorial to peace. And any citizen can come through and stand here, can take a moment and consider, this horrific history that war has brought us, war for profits brought us in World War II. I went by it just for not even 1 minute on my tram as we were going through Hiroshima towards where we were going to have our march. This is how I saw it. I saw it locked down, covered by police who were sent in from every single prefecture of Japan. They sent 24,000 police officers from all corners of the country to descend on Hiroshima to completely lock it down for the G7. The one time I got to see the Hiroshima Peace Memorial, peace was literally militarized. No one was allowed in because the G7 leaders were just around the corner having their meeting. And this was the day after they had their little ceremony where they were shown on camera putting wreaths down and seeming to be, to remember the people who were lost.
Right.
And they only went right back in around the corner and plotted how they'll make sure World War III goes in their favor. This is the only time I've ever seen this memorial to peace.
That's some picture.
And it's really, again, I've said it so many times already, it's indicative of how far Japan and the other G7 countries have come, to enforce the US-led military doctrine. The US is saying that the Indo-Pacific strategy of the US says we're going to push for a free and open Indo-Pacific, right? So free for US corporations to come in and open for investment, buying out all like the land that I've seen in the Philippines and Thailand and Hong Kong, that where people are out of work, farmers are displaced from their land, and there's police are pretty much private thugs who are paid off by the highest bidder. That's what a free and open Asia Pacific looks like. I've seen that in other countries, and now I got to go to again the big US fortress that they're building up, Japan, to make it happen. But what did we do? Even after our comrades, my friends, were not let in, we took to the streets. So this was just from day one. We had a summit first. We were in Kyoto first. We had a people's summit against the G7. We had speakers from all the countries who had come down: Philippines, Korea, Hong Kong, as well as multiple folks in Japan. There was our host organization is the AWC, stands for Asia-Wide Campaign Against US, it's such a long word, US-Japan Domination and something of Asia Pacific. I never remember the whole thing. But I mean, it was all ages. I mean, there were folks there who, there was at least one person who was there who was old enough to remember when the bombs were dropped.
I remember the day the bomb went off.
Mm-hmm.
You know what I did? I was 10 years old. I went and sat down on the top step of the stairs in our house, going upstairs. And this is all very irrational, but I was a 10-year-old kid. I knew it meant we were going to win the war, but I knew also that it was so scary for the future. I went and kind of hid out as far from any door or window as I could. That was some day.
The days of duck and cover.
And that was the first duck and cover, first day.
That was that day, August 6th.
Yeah. So there were folks there who were also remembering that day, and there were other people as old as I am, some younger, who were also saying, we don't want this to ever happen again. And so we started marching down the streets of Hiroshima. This is one of our friends who came in from South Korea. And of course, this banner says, depose the scheme to build an Asian version of NATO, because that's what they're trying to do with these military agreements, like the Quad, that's connecting US, Japan, Australia, and India in further military deals. There's AUKUS that is giving nuclear submarines. There's now nuclear submarines that are being gifted to Australia. So all of this, our big push that we were saying in the Kyoto summit and on the streets later was we don't want get NATO out of Asia Pacific. Which, by the way, NATO opened its first ever overseas, over non-member office in Japan,
Right.
just days before G7. Here's some other photos here, just showing just how diverse the folks were. This was our big banner: Junk G7, U.S. out of Asia Pacific, and no build up to war. Again, pushing how these plans are just another build up to war that the G7 leaders are having. Here's us with our big resist banner. And now finally we get under this big banner inside the mall where it's celebrating, hey, the G7 Hiroshima summit is here. And here we're holding up our sign saying no G7. So that was from the first day. We had a second day of marching that was closer also to where the actual summit was being held. The police just keeping us held in line the whole time. Of course, there were some youth who were trying to really kind of see how far they could push. Be like, are you gonna keep us in this line? No, if you're gonna tell us that we have to stay here, we're just gonna see just how much we can kind of push out. And there was this kind of interesting thing of the youth, not going all out to try to there was no use in fully trying to push past the police. But it was just, I think, really hopeful to see people not feeling cowed in, people were not feeling fear. We were still able to be no, we have to push.
Remember, there was a question that somebody had asked you, Otoma, were there more the demonstrators were outside people, they were whites, Americans, Europeans, or were there Japanese taking place? And he said, of course, there were mostly Japanese people.
Was, yeah.
Yeah. And that's what people need to know and hear.
Yeah. Of course, Tama-san, a friend of Dan, a friend of other people in VFP that I got to meet, who was there with us too from Okinawa. And that was another element of what we got to do. We got to join AWC's Solidarity Forum, where they had I think over 100 people who were there in the community center, and there were speakers, 3 indigenous speakers